Can you imagine a world where your bank suddenly turns on you and use their financial power to seize your assets under duress? Well, that's the world that my guest Andy Keats found himself in. Not in some banana republic like Venezuela or Colombia, but right here in the UK. Well, joining myself and Kabir Kerr, chairman of the Mid-Norfolk branch of Reform UK, is the newly elected town councillor for Durham, Andy Keats, who joins us today to tell his story. Andy, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks very much.
Now, Andy, could you tell us, in your own words, how you find yourself in a legal battle with RBS?
Indeed, I can. Trying to make it say this in a non-complex way. I think when I retired from the Metropolitan Police, I set up a business, and that business was in Durham, in Norfolk. We had 28 staff, and we were selling pet identification products. And all of our sales were made by credit or debit card payments by our customers. So you have to enter into an agreement with an acquirer bank, in this case RBS, and a merchant acquirer, in this case WorldPay. So we made about 62,000 sales, all going very well. We were very successul, and we had no what they call chargebacks. Chargebacks are where customer disputes a transaction. And we had one, I think, in 62,000 sales, something like that. And suddenly, one day, the bank wrote to us and said, "You're a risk to the bank. Your sales are a risk to the bank. We're keeping all your money."
So you're a viable business that was profitable.
Absolutely.
No untoward signs of anything going wrong, and suddenly you get this out of the blue.
Yeah, and no borrowing with the bank, no nothing. They just said, "We're keeping your money, and we're terminating your contract," which had been newly signed 3 weeks earlier. And they said, "If you want to do anything about this, you've got to contact our lawyers." So we thought, right. So the sales were coming in hour by hour, day by day, and the money just wasn't coming to us, and we had no money coming in whatsoever. So we were like insolvent.
So this is money coming from customers into the bank. So the customers had paid money. You're not receiving it. It's now being held frozen by the bank.
So we've got a fully running business with no money coming in at all. So cut a long story short, we threatened an injunction against the bank, and we had a hurried meeting with the bank, and we went down to RBS's headquarters in London, and they said, Visa rules and MasterCard rules are that lifetime registrations, lifetime memberships of anything are a breach of those rules. And we said, okay. Well, we've sold about 60,000 of these things, and you've processed them all, and we've paid you to process them all, and now you're telling us it's a breach. And they said, all of those customers could ask for their money back for the entire life going forward. You say, that doesn't sound right. Show us the rules. Oh no, we can't show you the rules.
Can I ask you, Andy, just to interrupt there, how long had you been trading up to this point?
13 years.
So 13 years of normal business process, and not one single thing had been said by the bank during those 13 years?
No.
And suddenly they hit you with this and saying, you've been breaking the rules.
Yeah, right from day one.
Right.
And they said from day one until then, all of those sales could be charged back 100%.
So you could be liable for 13 years worth of sales?
So, cut a long story short, we said, don't believe you. Where are the rules? You can't see the rules. So we said, right, independent review, please. So KPMG, bad choice, but KPMG came. And KPMG said, well, we understand that the rules are such that, customers could charge back. So they then said that we were £684,000 liability to the bank. Right. And at that point, the bank said, okay, then we'll give you all your money back, provided you change your terms and conditions to say that refunds are only available for a month. And after a month, nothing. So I thought, this is wrong. There's something wrong. Anyway, we traded on. We got our money back, we traded on. What we didn't know was that, and what's come out now, is that there are no such rules in MasterCard or Visa. That's just a lie. The whole thing was a lie. And from that day forward, the bank in the background was making up complete lies about us to its credit division. And they were saying that they then said that this £684,000 merchant potential liability, they called it, in the next year went up to 11.5 million. And in September the following year, they did it again. And they terminated us. And then they kept our money. And this time, they didn't stop keeping our money. And it all ended up on the 29th of November 2007 with a letter from DLA Piper, the bank's lawyers, saying, we'll release £27,000 to pay your staff wages on the condition, 3 conditions. 1, that you stop trading tomorrow. So you can't take credit card payments anymore tomorrow, which makes us bust. 2, the bank keeps the rest of the money for its costs. And 3, you sign an agreement not to pursue the bank with any claims against it.
So it's a carte blanche. We'll keep everything, and then you can't come after us.
Yeah. And you've got to agree not to come after us.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I know people will be questioning is the timeline, because I, for one, have heard other stories similar to this post-2008 crisis, but actually the dates you're talking about are actually before the financial crisis, aren't they?
Yeah. The banks knew they were in trouble.
Yeah.
And they were being told by HM Treasury to recapitalise, because they've been selling all these subprime mortgages and subprime loans to all over the world, and the collapse was coming. Everyone knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And they were turning on their customers even before the crash.
Yeah.
And the HM Treasury actually said, we're not going to look, we're not going to hear, you just recapitalise your banks. And that's what they were doing. And RBS were a big part of that. And at the very same time, RBS were denying that they had any link to subprime mortgages at all.
Yeah.
To the markets in London. And of course, they were up to their neck in it. And Lloyds were the same. All these banks were the same. They had to recapitalise, and that means they had to bring money back into the bank. So they turned on their customers, and they just started breaking loans, forcing people to repay. They give you 28 days, they give you 14 days, or maybe even 48 hours sometimes to repay your loan. And if you didn't, you went into administration the following day.
Yeah.
48 hours later, they put the administrators in
and of course
take everything.
Yeah, so really the agenda behind this isn't just seizing the cash, it's beyond that. It's assets that come with the businesses.
Yeah. And they had, in RBS's case, they set up a sort of a division, if you like, that dealt with the assets. But that division got so big that it had to have other divisions in Panama and around the world and in other offices. And they were running out of addresses to put these assets in because they had so many of them.
Yeah.
And I've got internal bank documents now from whistleblowers and things like that were showing how well they were doing on their plan to recover all these assets and breach everybody's loans. And people were just literally, it didn't matter whether you were, these people weren't in breach of their loans. They weren't not paying their loans. Mm. They just said, for example, they'd say, we've given you, your loan is, I don't know if you understand loan to value, but they'd say, right, your property's worth £1 million, we'll give you £600,000 loan. Yeah. And then they'd say, well, we've decided your property's only worth £900,000, therefore you're in breach of your loan to value, therefore you need to repay your loan. And if you don't repay it in 48 hours, we'll come and take your property. And that's how it worked.
Now, getting back to your own case, obviously you talked about the cash that they seized. What other assets did that business have that they wanted?
Nothing.
Nothing. Just
no,
the cash.
Just the cash.
Okay.
But I don't really think they wanted our cash because it wasn't that much. I mean, they only got about £100,000 in the end. But I think with us, we got caught up in a bigger thing that in 2006 we now know that they were terminating loads of people in the same way and keeping their cash. So it wasn't just us, it was lots of them. And lots of people went under.
But of course, the difference...
We fought them.
No, of course, that is the key difference that I want to talk about now is, of course, many unfortunate victims just took it on the chin, went bankrupt or were dissolved, and that was it, and lost everything. But you were one of the few who actually stood up against this. Can you talk about what steps you took then to fight back?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a long road, but in 2009 we first started litigation against them. And at the same time, the other side of the bank, NatWest, started to tell me that I was in mortgage arrears when I wasn't, but that's a different story. So from 2009 to 2012, we were litigating, and they play a trick on you, which is that they allow you to win, and then they appeal your win. And then they appeal again, and then they appeal again. And they keep appealing to higher and higher courts, and it's just costing more and more money. Mm-hmm. And we had what they call after the event insurance, so we were fine. And then we got to a final high court situation where they actually managed to strike out our claim before it was heard. And then we went to Lord Justice Reimer and Lord Justice Atkins, so the highest of the high, who said, no, this is nonsense. You can appeal that. And on all points, you can appeal and you can go forward with your claim. And right at that moment, our King's Counsel, or Queen's Counsel at the time, wrote to everyone and said, we've got them. And at that very moment, our after the event insurers wrote to us and said, we're not insuring you anymore. And 5 days later, we didn't have a case because we couldn't afford to carry on because the after the event insurers had pulled out, and they wouldn't give us an explanation as to why.
So the rug was pulled from beneath you by your insurance company. Do you think there was some form of collusion behind the scenes?
Yes.
Do you have any evidence of that, or that's an obvious assumption?
It's an obvious assumption, and it's something that the industry itself has recognised was happening. Yeah,
it was a bit obvious. So, but there is evidence that I gather you have collected over those years of a whole litany of, I would even argue, criminal misrepresentation of the facts, altering records and such. Can you talk about some of the evidence that you've uncovered that went on from the bank's side?
Yeah. Well, in my business case here, you had all the records to the credit reference agencies were completely false from start to finish, and they talked about the directors of my company stripping it of its assets by taking dividends and funding lavish lifestyles and all this. I had one house in East Tuddenham, which we'd had since 1990. We bought for £150,000, so it wasn't a lavish lifestyle, and they were just making it up. They were literally just making it up, the whole thing, and they were talking about our business was going to the pan, going to the wall, that it was insolvent, all this stuff. It was just a lie.
This is personal. Clearly, they were coming after you personally.
Absolutely, and it was all within their records that we didn't have, and they weren't disclosed at all until 2012. And when they were disclosed, we realised that all of the witness statements that had gone into court were all false, entirely false, which, of course, and all of a sudden, after the event insurers pull out. So all of this stuff was false. And in parallel, and I mentioned about the mortgage case, in parallel, they started telling me, you're £45,000 overdrawn on your mortgage. So, are we not? Yes, you are. And they made up records to show that. And they were reporting it to the credit reference agencies. Yeah. And I've got books, documents here that show false bank statements, false everything.
So these are banks that are fabricating evidence to support their case?
In this particular case, NatWest, and that was NatWest not NatWest in Norwich, which was the NatWest One account, but the RBS version, the unregulated bank RBS in Birmingham, were making up all this stuff, and our account had been transferred from Norwich to Birmingham. Yeah. To the credit, and this is where it was all going on. So my complaint emails were completely stripped of all the complaints, so that it didn't seem like I complained, and it just carried on and carried on. And they took possession action against us in 2012, and the entirety of their possession claim, everything they put into court is false. Yeah. The entirety of it, false. And rather than go to court, we paid this. By then, they said it was £56,000, and we said, "Okay, there you go. There's 56 grand in cash. Put us back to rights." Yeah, I've got the documents here. Having done that, they then falsified them again to show that we were in arrears immediately.
So they weren't reverted straight back to the same old.
They just ignored what we'd done and just made it seem as though we were in arrears.
Yeah, I mean, it does appear to me, again, just to use the phrase, it's a litany of lies and fabricated evidence. Do you think this is because you were one of the very few who actually stood up, didn't lay back and take it like most victims did? You actually stood up against them and tried to take them on?
Yeah. They knew that, I mean, with the police background that I had, I was more able to take them on than most people, because I know how it works, if you see what I mean. I know how to put a case together, and I know how to investigate. Whereas most people don't. You're a farmer or something. You're not into this stuff. You don't know how to take on a bank. And then and then through the course of the rise of the internet, really, that's when we understood that it wasn't just us. This was widespread. And that's when we started with the Serious Banking Complaints Bureau in 2012. And we were inundated with people coming telling us all sorts of stories. They'd gone from having yachts, cars and houses to living in a caravan overnight, with just all their assets seized, and then they come after the house, and then they come after you personally under personal guarantees, and they sell £1 million property off for £100,000, and then say, "Well, you owe the rest, mate." And so they come after you personally with the intention of making you bankrupt, so that you can't fight, because then your life is then ruled by a trustee in bankruptcy. Not that they made me bankrupt, but they tried. Oh yeah, they've tried very hard, and everything that they've tried has actually gone sour for them eventually.
So I suppose the next step really in the story is, on the face of it, would appear to be a good news step. There was a body that was set up to arbitrate between the banks and the victims. Talk us through about that. As I say, on the face of it, it appears to be a good thing that happened, but even that turned sour, I gather.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2019, the government, the then Chancellor, Sir Philip Hammond, wrote to UK Finance and said, "Right, this has got to stop. We've got to resolve these historic complaints. They are there to be resolved, and I want them resolved, and I want a meaningful number of complaints resolved, and it should be through an independent Business Banking Complaints Bureau." That's what it was called, the BBRS, the Business Banking Resolution Service. And so he wanted stakeholders from the SME communities to be involved with the banks to get together to form a scheme so that everyone could be resolved. Great. So that's what we did. And other stakeholders were people like Kevin Hollinrake, now the chairman of the Conservative Party. The Federation of Small Businesses was also a stakeholder. So we were in there negotiating over 2 years. We're building a system which cost 30 million quid to build. So the Business Banking Resolution Service started in February 2021. We put our complaint in, and like everyone else, 98.9% of customers were then told they were ineligible for review because of the eligibility criteria. Yeah. And they just fabricated they fabricated it again. So with our complaint, they said it wasn't the bank that was providing you with the banking service. It was WorldPay, the technology company. And as we can only deal with banks and banking complaints, we think that your complaints are not against the bank, they're actually against WorldPay. So we provided all the evidence to show that the complaints were against the bank and individuals within the bank, named individuals, and we got a barrister's opinion with it, and they took all this, and then they represented it to us in the form of a final decision and said, no, you are definitely ineligible, and these bits of evidence you've given show that it was WorldPay that provided the banking services, and your counsel opinion agrees with us that WorldPay provided the banking services, and so you're ineligible. So we said, well, that can't be right. We'll make a complaint. What you've said there is completely fabricating misrepresenting the evidence and what the council said. And they said, no, final decision is not appealable, so there's nothing you can do. So we ended up taking them to court about it, and that was in 2024. We started, 2024. We started with the court proceedings, and first of all, they said there wasn't a contract. So they tried to strike you out again without hearing the case. So here we go again. So same old thing. It's the Business Banking Resolution Service is supported by and funded by who? RBS, because that's the bank we're complaining about. So they've got all the money. So the first thing they say is the contract that we entered into with you isn't really a contract. It's not an enforceable contract. You can't take us to court. So that went to court, and then the court saying, well, it is a contract. They said, well, if it is a contract, then there's no terms in there that requires us to act in good faith, no terms that require us to act with reasonable care and skill, and no terms that require us to comply with our scheme rules. So in other words, if we act in bad faith, it doesn't matter. If we act without reasonable care and skill, it doesn't matter. And if we breach our scheme rules, that doesn't matter either. That's what they put to the court. And the court said, no, that's wrong. There's implied terms. So they then came back in July this year with the appeal hearing, where they brought up a completely new argument. And this time they said it was a deliberate thing to leave these out of the customer agreement. The bank, the 7 participating banks and the BBRS got together to agree that we would leave this stuff out of the customer agreement so that we could act in bad faith, act without reasonable care and skill, act without breach our scheme rules if we wish to, which means that if you bring a claim of bad faith, court, if Mr. Crewell, Mr. Keats bring a claim of bad faith, it can't win because we can act in bad faith, and that was their position in July.
So if we pick apart, and basically I summarise what you just detailed there, is this resolution service was set up and immediately rejected the vast majority of claims, but this resolution service is funded by the very people it's supposed to be arbitrating against.
Yeah. Well,
and therefore not independent. Allegedly.
Sorry, when I say allegedly, what I mean is that the Financial Ombudsman Service works by, if you make a complaint against your bank, then your bank has to pay the Financial Ombudsman Service. That's wrong in itself. But this was set up in a similar way that whoever the bank was that is complained about, they have to fund it, essentially, because who else is going to fund it? No one but the bank. And I think it's wrong that happens, because the bank then says, well, it's our reputation, it's our money at stake. We need to have a handle on this, and they do, and they just took over it, and they've taken over the BBRS.
Do you feel this is a bit of a banking establishment stitch-up?
Yeah, it is, and they've admitted it in court. So yesterday, wonderfully, we got the judgment, which was 5 months after. So we had to wait 5 months, but it's found in our favour in all points. So we are now on the front foot with this, and that judgment came out yesterday. So they do have to act in good faith. They do have to act with reasonable care and skill. They do have to comply with their scheme rules according to the judgment, and therefore we can bring a claim of bad faith. So we can now go forward to the hearing, the trial, if we ever get there, and the chances are that they will want to settle something or find a way forward.
Is it possible for them to appeal that decision? Or
they've already said that they're considering appeal.
Yeah.
But by the way, the Business Banking Resolution Service, the judgment was due last Monday.
Yeah.
And last Monday, the Business Banking Resolution Service put itself into voluntary liquidation.
As they say, you couldn't make it up.
It's crazy. The thing that I want to understand, Andy, because this is what I'm really passionate about, is actually fixing these problems and finding the solutions. So I'd like to hear from you in your words. What would you like to see changed to stop this from happening again?
Well, there's some very simple things, really. One is that if you take the Business Banking Resolution Service or what they call the Foskett panel, which is from the Halifax Bank of Scotland fraud, they both had SME stakeholders in them, which was us, Kevin Hollingbrake, and others. Okay, but as soon as it goes live, they then dump you, and you're then outside. And when it goes live, they then can do what they want, essentially. So what you need to do is keep the stakeholders in right the way through the process to hold their feet to the fire. That's number one. Number two, this business about eligibility to actually be reviewed is nonsense. It's got to be really, really simple. Obviously, I can't make a complaint about RBS if I don't bank with them. So that could be a criteria. But you can't start talking about, well, how much turnover have you got? And, all this sort of nonsense. It's a complaint. It's a complaint.
They've got to lower the thresholds, basically.
You have to be able to make your complaint, and it has to be heard independently. So keeping the stakeholders in the process will make it transparent. And that's what has to happen, really. Just keep the stakeholders in the process.
Yeah.
But from what the BBRS, Reform want to champion SMEs.
Yeah.
And I'm part of Reform, and I'm a councillor. Kabir's our leader, and Nigel's our ultimate leader, and he wants to champion SMEs. And one of the ways we can do that is to actually take this debacle of the BBRS, take it back through Parliament and say this has been a complete disaster. There have been 1,000 SMEs that have gone through it in total. They all need a re-review. Simple as that. They need a re-review, not a £30 million setup re-review, just something simple like arbitration or mediation or something like that. It's a very simple thing. You can do it in a year.
Yeah, unfortunately, it happens all too often in this country where big business bullies small and medium-sized businesses, and this is a perfect example of that. And it's something I'm really passionate about because I've had businesses in the past. I've run a small and a medium-sized business, and no one else out there that I can see is standing up for small business. I think Reform UK really are the party of small business, and that's why I'm so pleased to have you as one of our councillors. And
many congratulations on your recent appointment as Town Councillor for Dereham. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. A very disturbing message really there from my guest today. But thank you to Kabir and thank you to Andy Keats for joining us today. We'll see you next time.